Ladies and gentlemen, we are gonna build an easy, simple rocket in Kerbal Space Program 2, because this time around we got bored of normal Kerbal Space Program and we went to the evolution. Therefore, we are in the vehicle assembly building. Here we are able of building rockets by selecting the parts of the rocket from the part selector here on the left, and then clicking and attaching them in the middle there on the right. What we're gonna do is gonna take one Kerbal into orbit around Kerbin, which is the planet of the Kerbal Space Program video game. First and most important thing, as soon as you select the command pod, if you know that you wanna go back to Kerbin, you need to go to the utility and you see it says that there are parachutes. So let's go and select a parachute. We don't want a radial mounted like this one, we want an extra small, and it's the MK16 parachute, the one of the right correct size for the MK1 lander can. No, MK1 tin can, sorry, the lander can is the other one, which is not what we are gonna use. Therefore, we put the parachute must not be a drogue chute, otherwise if you are gonna attach a drogue chute, you are gonna splatter yourself in the ground, because drogue chutes are just needed to slow down a little bit to not have too much high G's while the main parachute deploys, and with this we are set for the re-entry and for the landing. Then, for future-proofing our spacecraft, we are gonna also install a heat shield. Right now, at this point, at the release of the early access of Kerbal Space Program 2, there is no heat effect, but we are just gonna put the heat shield to be sure to have it if eventually that part is going to be activated, like the heat is going to be really affecting our spacecraft. Then we go in the coupling section here that has the separators. We're going to take a stack decoupler and we're going to put it of the SM size again, just below our spacecraft and the heat shield. Then we need an upper stage. We need a stage that is going to take our spacecraft into orbit and maneuver it around while in space. So we select a fuel tank of the correct size and install it. So we go in the SM, and this one, which is halfway through the biggest and the medium, we can go with this one, and that's gonna be our part. So now it's the time of selecting an engine, and the best perfect engine for this kind of spacecraft here is the Terrier. So just go in the engine section, select the Terrier. We see it has 60 kilonewtons of thrust, and this one has 335 seconds of ISP, as you can see indicated. I cannot indicate it. Oh well, it has a very good ISP. It's a space optimized engine. It doesn't work very well at sea level, but it goes perfectly in the upper atmosphere and in the vacuum of space. Therefore, now that we have our upper stage and our spacecraft ready, we need again to add a decoupler, so we can just take it from here and put it just below. Otherwise, we can just also hold the Alt key and click on where we were, and then just put it below. We can cut out this part here, and then we may add another fuel tank below, like the longer one, like this. And below to this, we can use, like, click the mouse wheel and drag up, and then zoom in using the mouse wheel again, and add another engine. My favorite engine for this kind of things is the swivel, because it's the perfect size for this kind of rocket, and it has gimbaling, so it can control, it can swivel, it can gimbal around and control the rocket while it starts its flight. Therefore, now that we have it set, we can, well, first of all, discard this part here, and then get ready to add some boosters, which is at the base of Kerbal Space Program. So, now that we have our first and second stage created, we need to add some boosters. The boosters are gonna help us to get into orbit around Kerbin, and they are gonna give us the first kick of thrust at the beginning when jumping off the launch pad. So again, we need coupling because we need to attach them and also detach the boosters to not be heavier during the remaining part of the launch. Therefore, we can go in the radial decoupler section, and we're gonna take the big ones because we are sure that these ones are gonna give enough push to the boosters to fly away from our rocket and don't crash into it after the release. So we are gonna place them here, and down here you see that we have just one. In the symmetry mode, we can click onto it to make it become 2, or we can also use X to increase. It's gonna increase until 8, then go to mirror, and then go back to 1. We wanna have 2, and if you press Shift and X at the same time, you're gonna go back in this menu here. So we select 2, we put them more or less halfway through our stage, and then we select our boosters. Going back in the engine section, we are gonna have to select which kind of boosters we want. We could use the hammer, but I prefer the thumper, which is a little bigger and it's gonna ensure us enough delta V to get into orbit around Kerbin without any problems. So we can just put it on the side decoupler, and they are gonna already be 2 since we selected the symmetry previously, and we can just apply them just like that, and we're gonna have our boosters. Now, by pressing 2 on the keyboard, we are gonna go to the move part, and we can select the decoupler and lower them a little bit. I just like to do this for realism's sake, so that the jets of gas and of incandescent part don't come and hit my engine. You don't have to do that, it's just for optimizing a little bit the control and optimizing also like the visuals. Then you can just go back to the selection tool, which can be done also by pressing 1, like 2 goes to the move, 1 goes to the selection, and we can proceed and add some aerodynamic part. The aerodynamics are gonna help us to not be obviously well flat against the wind, and so we can just add this nose cone here. I prefer this one since it goes to the center of the spacecraft and not instead the other one, which is simply symmetrical with respect to the booster. You can put the one that you prefer. And like this, we would be more or less set. Just for safety, let's go in the structural part and let's add a strut that is gonna keep our boosters attached safely to the rocket. So let's just put the first part of the strut in the middle and the second one on the booster. We need to select the part of the booster where we want it to attach, and that's it. So here more or less we have our rocket. Still in the structural part we can add some launch clamps. The launch clamps are gonna help us to not fall off the launch pad when we are about to launch. Then we can select the spacecraft and drag all the way down, and then go down, clicking the mouse wheel and going down, and then put it a little lower, so that we are not gonna start with launch clamps that are 20 meters high and stuff like that. And like this, we can just decide to give the name. Let's say this one is the orbit tutorial, and we are ready to launch. But maybe if I were to write orbit correctly, this will be better. And this should be it, I guess. But I just said a big lie. We are not ready to launch. We need to check the staging, which is one of the most important things to do, because this is gonna allow us to decide which part is gonna activate when, and so make sure that we activate first the boosters and the main engine, then decouple, activate the second engine, and get into orbit. Therefore, we see here that the first thing to activate is gonna be the launch clamps. If these are gonna activate alone without the solid rocket boosters and the liquid fuel engine, this is gonna be a big problem, because we're gonna just fall on the launch pad. Therefore, what we're gonna do is gonna ignite the 2 boosters at the time of the release of the launch clamps. We are gonna ignite at the same time also the engine, so just drag it inside of there. We can erase these stages that we don't need. Then we're gonna separate the side boosters, then we're gonna activate the second engine while also we separate. So we see that there are 2 decouplers that are gonna activate at the same time in the same stage. This is not what we want, so we can just click on them, so it's gonna open and it's gonna show us that they are 2, and we can just click on one and drag it when we need it to be. So we need to see that the one at the bottom is gonna activate with the engine of the second stage of our spacecraft. Therefore, let's drag it down like that, and then the one of the capsule is gonna activate, and we are gonna be able to make the re-entry, and then the parachute as the last thing. So we just checked our staging, and now we need to make sure that our delta V is enough to get into orbit around Kerbin. As we see here, we have 4,989 meters per second of delta V in this rocket. So from the up bar, we can go to the trip planner, and the trip planner is gonna show us what delta V we need to go to each planet, each body of the solar system. And for example here it selects Bob just because it's the first one in alphabetical order, and it shows us from here that we need 3,400 meters per second of delta V to get into orbit around Kerbin, to get in low orbit around Kerbin, which is where we're gonna go today in this tutorial. Therefore we have more than enough. Actually we have an overkill amount of delta V. We can also, for example, just exchange this tank to another smaller one or we could put smaller boosters, but for the sake of this launch, we just want to make sure that we have enough, even if our spacecraft were to spin out during the launch. Therefore, we have everything ready, we check the staging, we have enough delta V, we can just check which Kerbal is going to be inside. It's going to be Team C Kerbal, and so we're going to fly with Team C. Let's just save again, save, and make sure that we have saved everything. Here we can select which launchpad to launch from. For example, launchpad 1, launchpad 2, or runway, but we are not an airplane, so we're gonna launch from a launchpad. We are not a boat. Don't hit boat launch. It doesn't mean that you're gonna launch from a boat. It means that you're gonna launch a boat. So you're gonna be in the sea, which is not what we want. And so we select launchpad 2, why not? And we go for launch. Differently from Kerbal Space Program 1, KSP2 loads super fast in the launchpad, so we are practically ready and set to take off. We have already the SIS activated, we have already the engine at 100%, so we can just hit the go button and the countdown is gonna start. And there we go, off the launch pad, the ignition of the boosters, the ignition of the main engine. Now we want to go in this direction, we want to go in a orbital path around the equator. We see that our spacecraft is already aligned perfectly with the axis from the nav ball, so we just start to tapping gently D to move our spacecraft and make it point to the east, which is in that direction. This way we never want to go out of the circle, which is the prograde vector that shows us where we are going, where we are accelerating forward, and we try to go to the east very slowly. In this way we are gonna get into orbit when our velocity is gonna be about 2000 something meters per second. So you see the boosters are almost running out of fuel, so we have to get ready to press space again to stage them and get free of them, and that's what we did now. And I did a little too early, so they kept on flying up, but we are still safe. Now we are at 25,000 meters practically. We have our apoapsis that's already at 100 meters. This is a very scuffed entrance into orbit, but that's alright. Since we are so high in the atmosphere, we can now just go practically sideways, and this is gonna give us the acceleration that we need in that direction, so towards the east, to enter in an orbit around the equator and prograde orbit, meaning that we go around the planet in the same direction that the planet turns around itself. And now we can just go until we deplete the entirety of the fuel inside of this stage. From the bottom we see our apoapsis and periapsis height. We see that the periapsis is negative, which means that our trajectory is still inside of the Earth, and that's not what we want, because we want it to be at the same height of the apoapsis, to be in a circular orbit. As soon as the fuel is gonna run out, we are gonna go to the map. Actually, we're gonna stage, get rid of that fuel, of that stage, shut off the engine because we don't need it now, and we can go to the map and create a maneuver node to enter into orbit. Okay, so now that we are in the map, we can see our apoapsis and where it is. We can just click on it and create a maneuver plan. So left click, create a maneuver plan. Then we click on the maneuver plan and we drag the prograde part and see how the maneuver is going to affect our orbit, and we want to do that until we get into our circular orbit, which has more or less, which we understand that it's circular when they start, the periapsis and the apoapsis start to rotate, because it means that they are about the same height. Okay, so now that we created the maneuver node, we can just wait until we're gonna get there. We see that we need to start our burn in 2 minutes, and then we're gonna have to get a delta V of 1022 meters per second. We have plenty, we have the double of that, so that's perfect. We can just use the UI down here and click on the arrows of the time warp, or use point, full stop and comma, period and comma to time warp until we are there to the maneuver node. And when we're about 10 seconds away or something like that, we can slow down. Okay, there was some confusion by the game there. More kebab into confirmed. Oh, definitely, there's plenty of kebab here. Okay, so as we see from here, we are performing our burn. We just need to aim at the maneuver node icon, or we can click here on the SIS control, and this is gonna allow us to track that little symbol, which means that our spacecraft is gonna be pointing in the correct direction to perform the orbital circularization. From the map, we can see how we are doing, how we are performing. This icon here shows us where we're gonna impact the ground if we were to continue on that trajectory. In the meantime, the trajectory prediction is gonna be completely different from the one that we created previously, but that's not a problem. We are just gonna have to believe this bar here that's gonna show us that we are almost halfway through the burn right now. And let's say that that's it. 143,000 meters on one side, 205 on the other. So we are into orbit. We can erase the maneuver node and just get to the apoapsis, and then from there burn again in the prograde direction, which we can also toggle by clicking here so that the spacecraft is gonna point prograde, and then rise our periapsis. Okay, so time warp towards the apoapsis, and once we're gonna get there, we can slow down the time warp. We can see the time that we have before reaching the apoapsis also down here at the bottom left, and let's use shift to accelerate until our periapsis is gonna be about at the same height. And there we have it. We are in orbit around Kerbin in a circular orbit of about 200 kilometers of height from the surface. But at a certain point we would like also to go back home. For what we can do is time warp until the Kerbal Space Center is not gonna be back in the sun side of the planet. So let's just use full stop a few times to accelerate time warp. If you don't wanna go crazy with the spacecraft going around like that, you can just right click on Kerbin and focus onto it, so that when you time warp, you're not gonna spin around like that. And now what we're gonna do is make our trajectory intercept the atmosphere of Kerbin at about 30 kilometers above the surface, and at about 30 kilometers above this meridian here around Kerbin. Like this island, when you put the pericenter at 30 kilometers from the surface around here, takes you to land very close to the Kerbal Space Center, which obviously doesn't matter in this game mode here, but it's just cool to land as close as possible to that location. Therefore, what we do is we wait to be on the other side of the planet, more or less in the same position of this peninsula here. We can create a maneuver node and drag in the retrograde direction the arrow like this, so that we see how much delta V we are gonna use to perform this maneuver, and the height at which our periapsis is gonna be 27 kilometers. It's fine, it's not required 30 kilometers perfectly, and we see that in 53 seconds we are gonna have to perform the burn to arrive down there. So we can use or the SAS to do that, or we can just simply automatically, manually I meant, spin around our spacecraft and go to the pointing backwards. Obviously we need to deactivate the pointing prograde, which we can do by just simply clicking here on the help by the SAS, so not on the aim to prograde, but just simply stability on and point at the retrograde. Or we could also use point at maneuver, but maneuver and retrograde are the same time, so we have are the same thing in this moment, since we're gonna burn retrograde to make our periapsis get lower inside of the atmosphere. So we're about 7 seconds away. We can get ready to start our burn, as the Kerbal just set us. And so let's go full throttle, and then actually slow a little down to be more precise, and let's check at the periapsis height here. Once it gets around 30 kilometers, we can simply stop like that. Okay, we can delete the maneuver now, and now go back to the orbital view and time warp as fast as possible to get to the other side. Now that we are inside of the atmosphere, the time warp is gonna go automatically at ×4. I prefer to slow down time and go at 1 time speed. We are gonna check the staging so that we don't activate the parachute at the wrong moment. We can just decouple, so that we separate from the upper stage. We can turn around the capsule to put ourselves in the configuration of the re-entry. This is the configuration that the normal capsules use, with normal spacecraft, not capsules, use, with the heat shield facing in the direction in which we are going and the parachute on the other side to make sure to not burn up in the atmosphere. The best thing to do here is or to deactivate the SAS, and the atmosphere is gonna do the rest to passively stabilize the spacecraft in the correct position as soon as we get where the atmosphere is gonna become a little bit thicker, not right now at 57 kilometers of height, or we could keep it active and ask to our Kerbal to point retrograde. It doesn't matter that much, also considering that right now in Kerbal Space Program 2 we don't have heat effects. We can just time warp then at ×4, which is the maximum that one can do inside of the atmosphere, and we see that we are more or less perfectly aligned with the Kerbal Space Center. In fact, we see this patch of ground here is from where we took off a little more than a few orbits ago, a few hours ago then. It's way bigger than the one of Kerbal Space Program 1. Look at those runways, they are gigantic. We see that our apocenter is inside the atmosphere, that our periapsis is inside of the Earth, which means that we are gonna eventually land. Hopefully land and not crash, obviously. And there we have it. I may have not lowered enough the pericenter. We could have gone a little bit lower, but that's alright for the first mission in Kerbal Space Program. And now we can slow down the time warp and deploy the parachute once we are at about below 300 meters per second. So just hit space, deploy the parachute. This one by default is gonna completely inflate at 1000 meters. If that's not alright for us, we can click on the up bar in the parts manager, go in utility, select the parachute and deploy settings and change the minimum altitude, the deploy altitude, but 1000, it's fine for us right now. So it's gonna start its animation, fully deploy and slow down our capsule to about 6-7 meters per second, something like that. And so again, for these last 500 meters, we can time warp at 4 times speed and get ready to splash down back in the ocean of Kerbal. For the last few meters, I prefer to go back to normal time warp to make sure that, to normal time, just to make sure that we don't impact too fast. Here I just selected the sea level. And there we have it. We splash down in the ocean, and that concludes our mission. We can now simply hit the escape menu here and select recover vessel. So congratulations, you just went into orbit around Kerbal, came back, safely landed in the ocean, and you're ready to do some other missions in the future. Thanks for watching, hope that you enjoyed it and that you learned something about orbital mechanics and Kerbal Space Program 2. See ya!